Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the podcast Strikes Back. My name is George and you're listening to the weekly movie show with the boys, Connor.
Sup?
And Benny.
Hello there.
Sponsored by Zoom. With the power of Zoom, it's week 2 in isolation for the podcast Strikes Back. And
Are you allowed to say that?
Nah. Oh yeah, I'm allowed to say whatever the fuck I want. So here we are. I'm sorry we're a day late. Connor and I experienced some hiccups along the way. Connor, you were a little bit unwell this week.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So I found out that the symptoms of severe heartburn mimic the symptoms of COVID-19. So I was hacking up my lungs and had a sore chest and went to the doctor like, I'm dying. Just give it to me straight. And he's like, no, you've got heartburn. Like, no, fine. I'll fuck off then.
How much is a statistic? Doc? Yeah, and then I was doing some vocals on the weekend because I've cracked out my old audio setup and just started to, try and do some creative stuff. I think at this time in at home, you need to kind of exercise these different areas of your mind. So I was doing these vocals and I totally blew out my voice because I haven't sung in so long and whatnot. So I sounded terrible earlier this week, so I just didn't want to. I know my voice is kind of annoying, and that's probably not the best thing for a podcast, but I didn't want to add that extra level of edge and unpleasantness to the podcast. So hey, here we are. It is Wednesday, and what an episode we have. As I said, week 2 in isolation, and we're mixing things up. We've got a few headlines this week, which is pretty cool. Hearing Black Widow, we've got some more concrete stuff on how that is being released, some stuff about Artemis Fowl, so some Disney releases there. Plus, later on the episode, we're going to be giving our top 3 zombie quarantine picks. That's right. We're going to go one by one and just list off some zombie flicks we've watched in the downtime. But before all that, let's catch up on what everyone's been watching. Benny, it's been another week. What have you been up to? What has been on your television, dude?
So I mentioned last week that I flew through the first season of Fleabag in one sitting right before recording the episode. I was just so enamored with it. That as soon as we stopped recording, as I think I alluded to, I watched the entire second season straight away. Second and final season, which I wasn't entirely aware of. And I just got to say, I haven't been this blown away by a single piece of media in so long. I really think there should be a disclaimer at the beginning that says there's only 12 episodes of this and there will only ever be 12 episodes of this. Because the first season came out in 2016, I believe. It was based on her one-woman show. Second season came 3 years later when I guess she was ready to make a sequel. But there's no plans to ever make any more. So it's just, and where it ends, you really want some more too. Not in an incomplete way, just in a, I need more of this.
I have some great news for you.
Oh,
I have some really good news for you. This is the English. This is what I'm talking about. The English pedigree. None of this American 17 seasons, 23 episodes, 12 episodes of pure brilliance. Same with Faulty Towers. This is the good stuff.
Uh-huh.
But don't worry, bro. Around the corner, a couple of years time, Christmas special. Maybe even a couple. Maybe even you'll get 2. Maybe you get one 5 years later. But 100% that's coming through. Don't you worry.
I love the irony of talking about the English pedigree, where one of the longest running series of all time is an English show. Doctor Who has been around for ages, and if you're talking pedigree, I mean,
yeah, and it's been going on forever, and they should have stopped it a long time ago.
I'm not going to respond to any of that.
Actually, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings out there. We got to stick up for the Doctor Who people. Anyway, sorry. Please continue, Benny. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, right?
Yes. Yep. Writer, director, creator.
Okay.
Amazing. And I've actually since watched the first season again. And I'm not huge into rewatching. Yeah, so I head over heels in love with this show.
What platform is that on?
My highest recommendation. It's on Amazon Prime. The whole thing. We're going to be talking about Amazon Prime a lot this week, actually, because I'm smashing through their stuff. And on the other side, I went for a bit of Stan and decided with all this free time to finally finish up Adventure Time. I was a massive fan of that show right from the very beginning, and eventually it just became really hard to follow the series because the last couple of seasons had very irregular release schedules, and it was very hard to track down where to watch it. So I just completely fell off. And with a show that steeped in continuity, believe it or not, for people who aren't super familiar with Adventure Time, it's very dense lore. I found it very hard to ever revisit it. But seeing as the entire 300 episodes are on Stan right now, I decided to try and jump back in somewhere comparable to where I left off. And I finally finished the series.
I have never watched a single episode of Adventure Time. I couldn't tell you what it's about. All I know is it's immensely popular.
Yeah.
I remember one time I was watching, it was a two-parter end of one of the seasons, and they go to this other dimension. And dude, it was trippy as shit, and it freaked me the fuck out. And I couldn't watch Adventure Time after that. It was
Wow.
do you know which season that is? I think it's season 5 or something. It was really in the thick of,
right.
and there was like,
Lich?
yeah, and they were like Square, or there's like another alternate reality version of them.
Oh, yeah.
Insane.
It gets crazy. Yeah, I really can't overstate how well they wove 8 seasons of continuity, or 10 seasons. What is it? But it's I'm so impressed by it, and the finale, a 45-minute finale, which the episodes are generally 11 minutes long, was probably the most satisfying television finale I've ever seen in my life. I'm so impressed by everything that they did with that show over its entire run. And the great news is that Pendleton Ward, the creator, has a new show coming out on Netflix.
I was literally about to ask if you had seen
this month, I think. Yep, which I'm very interested in. And after 2 years of being off the air, Adventure Time is coming back for a few specials on HBO Max. So I'm just really winning right now for Adventure Time stuff.
Very cool.
Yeah. George, have you seen the Midnight Gospel trailer?
Listen, there's been a couple of these. I'm just looking at it now. I haven't seen it, I don't think, but this art style looks incredible.
I tagged you in it on Facebook a while ago, but that's fine.
Hey, come on.
If there's ever
I tagged you on something,
George won't watch something.
Listen, you can't call me on this, mate. That's your designation on this podcast, all right? I'm at least one layer up from you.
To things.
I'm
I might not
one layer
respond to
up.
things, but I watch it. Yeah, how is Saint Maud?
At least I'm honest. Okay, yeah, Adventure Time. Shit, that's a blast from the past, man. Yeah, got nothing else to say.
No, that was it.
That's all you've watched?
What about you, George?
700 episodes of Adventure Time. Is that all you've watched this week? Jesus,
I've
man.
been playing.
You disappoint me. I'm working 9 to 5 still, and what the fuck have you been doing?
Spyro the Dragon again.
Connor, tell us what you've been watching, bro, other than those zombie movies.
Yeah, watch some zombie movies. A lot of just like revisiting old series. I've been with my fiance. I've been rewatching Archer, which is a series that I always kind of forget how much I enjoy that series. And I just think that it's really clever writing. Like the subject matter is crude and it's it's a bit out there, but I just the way that they write through their scenes, and there's an ongoing joke about how the beginning of one scene is the answer to a question in the last scene, and that kind of goes throughout the entire series, and it is so fucking clever, and I don't think that series gets enough credit for that kind of writing. So yeah, re-going through that. Also finished up season 2 of Miracle Workers, which is the Daniel Radcliffe and Steve Buscemi series on Stan. The first one was the series around how God wanted to destroy Earth. And God was played by Steve Buscemi, which is a cool little series. The season 2 just took the same actors and and some very loose concepts from the first one, and set them in medieval times, which I thought was a very kind of clever. It's almost like an anthology style thing.
Everyone's sort of playing different roles, right?
Yeah, different roles. Some, like the main kind of, I guess, story arcs are somewhat similar, more or less, but not in any ways that feel kind of forced, I suppose. So, so I could just hear you sighing, George.
What?
You're breathing so loud, George.
I'm so sorry. Let me turn my mic down.
So
this is
impressive.
like, it's like going to be really invasive on people's ears.
I don't normally have.
Talking again.
Yeah. I don't normally have it like in my ears. Yeah. I don't normally have it like in my ears.
Is that better now?
Anyways, yeah, we can hear you.
A little bit like. You tell me anyway. You guide me on this, people.
Yeah, so season 2, well worth checking out. I think they just wrapped up on Stan. And finally, I watched a movie that's been out for quite a while, but I never really got to, which was Sully, which was the Clint Eastwood directed movie about Captain Sullenberger and the Miracle on the Hudson. It's, I don't know, these kind of movies always give me a bit of a bad taste in the mouth, because it's about, it's about 200 seconds, right? Like this whole thing could take, spans 200 seconds about when they hit the birds, and then they got to get off to the land on the Hudson and that. And I just feel like these kinds of movies are always a little bit, I don't know how to describe it. It's the Boston Marathon movie that Mark Wahlberg did, or like the disaster movies that just kind of focus on one, and they're always, waving the flag, and it always just feels a bit icky. Like they're kind of profiteering off tragedy or something like that.
Exploitative.
That's the one.
So
I'm always
does
a bit
it not become exploitative? Like, what's the duration of time?
I don't even know that it's time, right? Like it's hard. It's kind of it's very hard to describe. It's just kind of a feeling, right? Like you just kind of get the sense that, this is just exploiting a small or a big or like a specific point in time. Anyways, I did check this out, and it wasn't nearly as egregious on that. By George, wasn't nearly as egregious on that front as I thought it was going to be. I thought that Tom Hanks did a really good job. I thought that they did a really good job of building this kind of, like, I guess, fear. Like you kind of got the sense, like you got the stress. And so, yeah, I thought it was a really good film. It did feel as though that they were padding it out a bit because there wasn't that much to explore, which did make it feel a little less impactful. But I think the acting and the atmosphere gets it a pass.
I just can't work up the energy to watch a Clint Eastwood movie. Yeah. I feel like he's just a bit past it, quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, they always kind of take themselves a little bit too seriously, don't they? And that can work in his favor, and then that sometimes can feel a bit iffy. But this is something that I would definitely say is worth checking out, just to kind of see Tom Hanks act, to, I guess, feel a bit of the anxiety of the situation, which I thought he.
Also, the main guy's name is Sullenberger, which is pretty fun.
Yep. So you always got that. What about you, Georgie?
I was mainly focused on the zombie movies, which was quite enjoyable. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I checked out as part of me purchasing The Rise of Skywalker, I checked out the 2-hour documentary attached to it, and actually kind of watched it almost twice, just skimmed through a few parts again. And man, this was, you know, I was saying to Ben the other day, you know, you just don't appreciate the amount of effort it takes to do just the smallest of sequences. Even Ray at the beginning, jumping over in the forest, jumping over that canyon and over to the other side, you know, seeing how that is all set up, sculpted, the stunt coordinator managing it, getting the take on set. You know, it's absolutely phenomenal when you think about the amount of personnel involved in these films. And, you know, sometimes we just go, you know, is crap, you know, or
Very
whatever.
spoiled.
But yeah, exactly. That's exactly the word. And it just made me reflect on, like, you know, maybe the story doesn't work on a film, but the craft sometimes can often just, there's so much attention to detail in these other areas of film. So yeah, it's an incredible piece. I'd say both The Rise of Skywalker and this documentary are really fantastic. This one is a little more by the numbers. It's like, here's this sequence and this is how we did it, kind of thing. Whilst in the Last Jedi one is so focused on Rian Johnson in his headspace. It's actually a fascinating watch. A high recommend from me. But yeah, just
Pretty good
kind of,
metaphor for the films themselves, I guess.
dude. And it's so, the documentary is so in the headspace of pre Last Jedi. You know, there's no backlash. There's no, the Star Wars
Right,
fan
yeah.
base is divided. You know, this is like, we're in goodwill territory. We've had Force Awakens in Rogue One territory. You know, so, you know, in terms of, you know, maybe not on your Richter scale, but, you know, on the general Star Wars fan, you know, a lot of people were pretty happy at that time. And then when Last Jedi came out, that's where everything really got crazy.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point about not kind of considering what goes into a lot of these films now, like these big pieces, like Hollywood blockbuster films. You know, I think we've had enough really good films that have had a lot of effort put into them that mediocrity is not quite cutting it for a lot of people anymore. And for better or for worse, you know, that what goes along with that is, even if there's the slightest, you know, mistake or kind of loss of attention, or they didn't have enough time to finish something, people come down on it like a ton of bricks, right? You know, we were all pretty harsh on Panther because the effects work on that. We all thought it was pretty shoddy. But I mean, if you compare that to something that came out 10 years ago, that's a fucking masterpiece in terms of special effects. And so
Depends on what you're talking about.
I think that's, I mean, true, but I think it's just really interesting what you mentioned about how spoiled we are with movies now.
I think one of the most interesting things that Corridor Crew show on YouTube, which if you haven't watched, everyone listening, get your ass on that. I'm sure you have. But what the general sentiment was like, you know, back in the day, everyone was picking and choosing their battles way more, and the shot list for VFX have just skyrocketed. And, you know, the more shots, quality over quantity, essentially. And, you know, we've got some really timeless stuff. A film talking about later, for me, I know it actually doesn't really classify as CGI, but, you know, when you nail it, even Terminator 2, I feel like that is still pretty damn timeless, you know. I think it looks pretty damn good. And it's only sort of 40 shots or 12 shots or something, you know. It's a handful. And then you know, capabilities get et cetera, and now here we are, and we get Sonic the Hedgehog. Yeah, you know, fuck.
Good shit.
Anyway, that's about it for me. We'll talk about the zombie movies later, but let's catch up on a few news releases from the week. Last week we had nothing to talk about, and this week we got like 5 things to talk about. So, Benny,
Sort of.
as our main man with the knowledge, tell us what's been going on, dude.
So yeah, as you mentioned, we finally had kind of a break in silence for what is happening in Hollywood. Disney has come out and kind of laid out their entire plan going forward from here, more or less. The big place I want to start with is, of course, the MCU, because this is the one we're all wondering about. Black Widow was one of the last kind of pillars of the blockbuster season to fall and withdraw its release date. And we're all wondering, is this going to go straight to Disney Plus, straight to on demand, some kind of streaming service, or are they going to wait all of this out? And wait it out, they are going to. They're not half measuring it like putting this in June or anything. They've taken the Eternals release date of, what do we got, November 9th. So they're pushing all the way to the end of the year and thus kind of bumping the entire MCU one movie back moving forward, which is, there's positives and negatives to it, I guess.
Yeah, it makes sense. Disney has so far stuck to their guns in terms of having a lot of their big name releases maintain on film. And I don't mean that in relation to COVID. I mean, they are pretty adamant that their main, their blockbusters are going to have full run theatrical releases, and then they'll adapt to streaming way down the line. And that's not to say that they don't have a streaming strategy, obviously with their Disney Plus pieces. But yeah, I think it's impressive to see how much they are sticking to their guns, and they're just like, nah, this is getting its full theatrical release. We'll wait 6 months if we have to.
I think it's a really interesting strategy. And, my day job is working in a marketing agency, and we're seeing so many different people react in so many different ways. And, historically, like when brands continue to advertise in these times, they're very front of mind. And, right now there's no entertainment, like people are like, other than Tiger King, which is, I think, Netflix's most viewed show ever in the first 14 days ever.
Wow.
Are there opportunities here where there's very, very low competition? People are hungry and they've got their eyes stuck on a screen. Is there an opportunity here for big Disney to acquire 5 million extra subscribers by making Disney Plus the front and center? I am actually really surprised on this. UFC, Connor and I are big fans, and they're pivoting in a really, really interesting way. And there's not going to be an audience there, but they're going to be filming the fights and live streaming them. So it's like, they're pivoting, they're doing their thing. I wonder, like, Disney, this seems, you're in a big lumbering ship when you're in Disney. This is a huge entity, and it makes sense that they'd kick it down the line because they are of that sort of old world business mentality, if we're comparing it to something like the UFC, which is a lot more new age, a bit more rapid fire, a bit more agile. So it's just interesting to see this way. And I think a massive missed opportunity, especially Disney Plus just launched in Europe and shit. Like, come on, guys, this is global now.
They need something crazy for those other markets. Because the months-old Mandalorian episodes ain't going to cut it, considering everyone's definitely already seen them already.
I'm done.
Over there.
My Disney Plus is still not resubscribed.
Same.
Yeah, I think that it is interesting, and I don't even know that it's a bad strategy. If I'm to be honest, what they're doing is they're making event films, and they're really like, if your strategy is to make event films, then you almost have to kind of stick to your guns. And I think that if you devalued the brand by putting it straight onto Disney Plus, then, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. And I think that you are tainting that kind of air of having these films be event films.
They are probably going to have to take that dive eventually, though. And this does seem like a decent opportunity for it. I mean, yes, there is the point of view that it devalues these movies, and to a lot of people that would be the case. There would also be the point that Georgia kind of made, that it would severely like value Disney Plus, which is something they probably really want to be doing at this point. And I do think for people like us, there is a big difference between something releasing cinematically and something at home. But for a lot of people, you know, their big event is like Stranger Things season 3 coming to Netflix. And that certainly, if you scroll through Facebook, that certainly does seem like an event.
Yeah. And I think they have a strategy for that, right? Like they've got their property that they've curated for that kind of release. So they've got all their properties like WandaVision and Falcon and Captain America, all that kind of shit. I think that for them, they want to have that play out. They probably have a strategy where those titles are going to be released at a certain time or going to be entering the market in a certain time, and they want to maintain the differentiation between those kinds of properties and their event properties. So, I mean, like, George, you're right. In the short term, they would probably get a shit ton of subscribers if they released Black Widow on Disney Plus. But what I think they're hoping for is that they'll get a shit ton of subscribers with some of their titles that are coming out soon, and the revenue from these event films.
And let's say in the example of like the exact same scenario, but there's no COVID-19, you know, there's no reason for them to not continue. Like they're going to go business as usual. But in this timeline that we're in, I sometimes feel like, actually, on another whole other note, I feel like we're in some like the Mandela effect or something. Some crazy shit's going on. And anyway, let's not talk about that.
It's definitely like, yeah, I mean, you're kind of right.
Like that fucking
right?
George Pell shit. Like I don't want to bring that up, but fuck George Pell.
You shouldn't bring it
up.
Fuck
that motherfucker.
You definitely shouldn't bring it up.
But that I was like, am I in another reality? Like, what is going on right now? It was blowing my mind. Anyway, we're talking about Black Widow and streaming.
Just to dial it back a bit, what do you guys feel more generally about the MCU being probably permanently delayed, or everything that we know in the MCU upcoming has been delayed, including the TV shows?
I'm not
quite a lot
disappointed about it. I think that with all these properties that have had these kinds of delays and have had this kind of fuck ups, MCU has been pretty consistent. And I've got to say, like, having it happen to the MCU because of something like a global pandemic, I'm willing to cut them some slack for it. I'm kind of like, I'm surprised this kind of shit hasn't happened already. Like we had a little bit of it with Guardians being delayed and throwing a wrench in their works there, and they deserve that wrench because they fucking did it to themselves. But yeah, for me, it's kind of like the fact that this kind of thing hasn't happened sooner. Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't give two shits, to be honest.
That's fair. You were talking about being spoiled, and I feel like the last time we had one MCU movie in a year was like 2010, 2011.
I'm just more pissed off that I got sidetracked on my thing. But what I was saying is like, you know, right now, what is being released? You know, why is Tiger King ranking in those kind of metrics? Because everyone's fucking at home. And actually, I'm seeing on a lot of other people, anecdotally, you know, podcasts and other things, you know, are not being listened to as much because people aren't commuting and stuff. And actually, people are watching more high quality, you know, video games, movies, high production TV show. People are spending their time doing that now at home. So why not leverage this scenario? Do I sound completely terrible right now? Is it skipping and stuff?
No, you're good.
Okay, cool. It just sounds like I'm getting all this stuff in my ears. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like, yes, okay, they've got this strategy and stuff. I completely agree with you, Connor. And as I said, this is a big lumbering ship. Disney aren't going to be able to probably pivot that quick. There's too much red tape.
I don't think it's an issue of pivoting. I think it's they have a strategy and they are sticking to it because they think there's a lot of, if you're that big, it's not just a matter of you can't pivot. You just sometimes don't want to. They're the big swinging dick, right? Like they've got a strategy, and they're going to be COVID be damned. We're sticking to it.
I would say
And
this is
there's a
kind of the
certain part of me,
opposite,
like,
though, to a degree, because I would have thought, and I've said this in episodes previous, that they would have been much more likely to stick to their schedule because they've planned out the next 5 years of Marvel movies. So for me, seeing them switch away from that, I think, is a huge move that kind of surprised me.
Yeah, there's probably more of a knock-on effect on the production side of things as compared to the the distribution side of things.
Yeah,
but you've just said it right there, right? Like, they're planning 5 years ahead. So for them, that brand equity, like that, how you view these event films really matters. And I think that they are already fighting a battle that, the only reason that they're able to have these like event films be as successful as they are is because they are maintaining that kind of event brand. So for me, I think that this is them kind of saying, we were fighting streaming before. If we're going to hold that position after this all, calms down, we need to maintain that position during. So I don't necessarily like. I think that for them, for the MCU, yeah, they delay 6 months, but that's not going to bankrupt Disney or anything like that. Hopefully not. So I don't see this as being, for them, a big loss. And in terms of the potential opportunity in terms of getting subscribers to Disney Plus, they might see that as not outweighing the potential damage to their brand.
I completely agree. I just think the narrative that you can form from, wow, Disney did this, and the conversation that can come up and the way people can perceive Disney Plus moving forward, it seems like a really, really nice opportunity for them. But I do agree with you. It does make sense. They don't want to devalue the cinematic experience, and that's out the window for could be 12 months. Who the fuck knows what's going to happen with COVID-19?
So speaking of devaluing the cinematic experience, we also have had a bunch of analysts this week coming out and saying that AMC, the largest theater chain in the world, could be facing bankruptcy very soon in this whole ordeal. Because last year they were already in $5 billion debt. I think the company was valued at around $300 million, $500 billion in debt. So that's insane. And their credit rating, I think, has been reduced to C minus. I don't know dick about credit ratings, but that doesn't sound like a good one.
It's not good.
And a lot of these people are saying that they could be filing for bankruptcy.
Wow.
Which, as I said, largest theater chain in the world. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out because they're not opening anytime soon, I feel.
So Apple's going to buy Disney, and then Disney's going to buy AMC, and Apple's just going to own everything.
Apple's going to buy the world.
Man. Possible.
Crazy.
That's wild to think about. I mean, that's going to be one of the big questions, right? And this kind of relates to what we just talked about in terms of, cinema release revenue. There might not be as many theaters. Like, they might not be able to release it in as many theaters.
So it is cool to see them kind of supporting the cinematic release still, because Lord knows we want that to stay around as much as possible.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, it's wild.
So just kind of relating to the MCU just a little bit as more, we just found out that Black Widow has dropped their composer, Alexandre Desplat, for Lorne Balfe, which is very minor news. I'm sure you guys don't care about it either. Oh, except the music did kind of sound cool in the trailers, didn't it? But what I think is interesting about this is that they're doing this. I assume they wouldn't be doing this if they were holding to their April release, which means they are taking steps to kind of improve upon, I guess, would be their goal here. This film, which for the MCU as a whole and this movie, I think is really cool that they are taking this extra time that they suddenly have and trying to improve the product.
Yeah, and one of the things interesting about this is that Sorry, Connor. I'm going to take this one, mate. What's interesting about Andre Desplat and Disney is he left Rogue One really late in the process, and Michael Giacchino
Right, that was
came on
him.
board, and now again moving into the Marvel universe. And I think Desplat is really one of the best going around.
Maybe he's a prick.
I mean, he's French, so sorry. Do we have any Frenchies listening to us? Actually, my cousins are French. My cousins are French, and I love French food, and I love France. So I'm just having a joke.
Good, you saved it.
Yeah, exactly. There we go. So yeah, that's it. That's it. That's all I got to say on that matter.
Yeah, I don't really know anything about Lorne Balfe except he's one of Hans Zimmer's cronies.
My interest in this is mostly around the concept of like, did they get to a release date and just did someone in that team, in that executive team, think, I'm not a fan of the music, but we don't have enough time, so let's just go? Or did they decide to change the date and then they went back and they were like, all right, well, let's find something to improve? Because both have, I think, I'm not really comfortable with either scenario. If they had stuff that they wanted to, or that they didn't like when they were going to release it, it's kind of upsetting that that they were going to release a product that they felt was subpar. Which I understand.
That's all of these movies, though.
Yeah, you have to get to a deadline. Like that's always going to be the case. But I would be even more upset if it was the other way around. I think because, if they were just like, oh, let's just change something because we should probably improve it somehow. And they were kind of like searching for things. And then what ends up is not what they had in mind or what they kind of initially thought they were going to release. And I feel like that can kind of sometimes, if you overanalyze and you spend too much time on a project, it can kind of just, it gets icky. Like you can always find problems with stuff and then you just overanalyze.
Oh yeah, they say art's never finished, just abandoned. So I feel like the answer probably lies somewhere in the middle of all these things. At any rate, I would like to be optimistic and say that they're just trying to make the best possible product they can, like from an artistic standpoint.
Yeah. And maybe Desplat doesn't like working in the Disney system. I think there is something there. Why would he be off these two projects so late in the game?
Maybe he's a prick.
Well, I mean, he wouldn't have been.
Yeah, I mean, you've already brought that to the table, all right? So,
Yeah. Then there's one little piece of news.
So yeah, the last part of this whole thing that I thought was interesting was that Artemis Fowl is heading directly to Disney Plus.
I'm really looking forward to us reviewing that because we're definitely doing a review.
Nope.
100%. 100%.
Yeah,
You're going to give me your password, one of you, whoever's got it.
I don't have one.
I don't think any of us have Disney Plus anymore.
Oh, damn it. Nah, that's content. That's hashtag content. We got to, guys. If you want to hear us at Artemis Fowl review, hit us up on any of the social medias.
Yeah, no, I think it's a smart decision. That feels like a straight to Disney Plus movie, anyways. As much as I wish that it wasn't, because I loved Artemis Fowl as a kid. So
you feel like there are it's areas that they can make exceptions to their valuing of cinematic releases?
So I suppose there's, for them, when I talk about event cinemas, like Artemis Fowl is not an event piece, right? When I talk about,
I'm sure they would intend it to be, though.
I mean, I think that they would know.
What's the budget?
That
Someone look up the budget for it.
I'll look it up now.
Not George. It's going to come out as like 400 million or something. No, so I mean, I'm talking about like your Star Wars films. I'm talking about your MCU films. Those are the kinds of films that I think that they would consider event films, and that they're going to be uncompromising in terms of theatrical release. Your film
125 million.
Everything in between.
125
Sorry,
million.
I think the main factor of this probably is that the movie's just probably not very good, and the response to it was quite overwhelmingly negative, I think. And George, you said 125 million?
Correct.
Yeah. So not a small amount.
Yeah, it's not a surprising move on their part. I don't think it interferes with their strategy of event films getting full theatrical releases. And in fact, it kind of supports it, right? They're more than willing to bring that content on Disney Plus if it's, one of kind of their regular theatrical releases.
I think that this move by Disney periodically makes Disney Plus look like a bit of a shit dumping ground. So whilst when the MCU shows come out, yeah, we're back to normal once Mandalorian season 2. Yeah, we're back on a good course. But from now until then, Disney Plus is perceived to be the shit dumping ground, and I'm out, and I'm not going to be hanging around until those shows come out. So, once Europe and these other territories get their little taste and realize, hey, I didn't want to really see The Little Mermaid for the 18th time, having that's great, but I'm not really using it. I think that it's interesting how this is going to play out. And I'd like to have a look to see how Disney's Plus subscribers are going to go by mid-year and beyond.
I bet you it's spiked now.
I'd be very curious.
I bet you with the amount of parents that have kids at home that they need to entertain. Fuck, man.
With the amount
Disney
of,
Plus is a gold mine for that shit.
With the amount of people knowing that Artemis Fowl is coming out and it's exclusive to Disney Plus, shit. The hordes, bro. The servers went down, I heard. It was crazy.
So there was a noticeably absent film from Disney's reshuffle, which is the ever delayed New Mutants, which does not have a cinematic release date or a digital release date. It's just not there currently. Surely that's going to be dumped on demand or on streaming or something eventually. But it did remind me of the interesting fact, if you cast your mind back a few years to when we had movies being released with release dates. This week was actually meant to mark the release of the New Mutants and the Cyborg movie from DC.
Yes, I remember tagging you in that last week. So heads up to George on that one.
So that's just a fun little throwback to a time when DC had a plan to make a bunch of movies, which, as we've seen, has completely fallen into disarray, but in a way that's worked out much better for them.
Joss Whedon.
Interesting.
Joss Whedon ruined it, mate.
They released a Snyder cut.
He's still posting stuff about that, by the way, like actively.
Snyder.
Yeah, he did a live stream commentary. It was awesome.
Just in so many ways boggles my mind.
It's great.
It kind of feels like one of those things, but like, just let it go, man. Fuck.
I honestly think the guy's actually going through a lot of trauma right now. He lost his daughter. I think he's going through a really dark time in his life. I truly believe that. Because when you look at Zack Snyder's release schedule of films, he was on a mission from 2005 when he released 300. I swear every 2 to 3 years there was another feature, and like his features are labor intensive. There's not like a little, we shot it in 3 weeks. No, these are fucking big shit. So I think he's going through a really tough time. And I wish him all the best, because a lot of people shit on Zack Snyder. I've definitely been one of those people, but I think he's actually one of the most talented people. And as we said earlier in the podcast, appreciating these different elements of filmmaking, he definitely has his style and he does it extremely well. So all the best to him. But yeah, that Vero social media platform that he's trying to get off the ground, yeah, fuck off with that, dude. Like, I'll let's call it a day there.
Way to high road us, Georgie.
Yeah, fucking what? Bring up the death of his daughter as like some kind of fuck you
mitigating factor to his shit films.
Okay. Yeah, neither of us were being unsympathetic to the fact that he has some tragedy in his life, but fuck me.
No, I just think it's just an interesting commentary. It's what I've noticed over I've been like following him like quite closely in his behavior, and it upsets me,
He's got a Netflix film on the way, doesn't he? Zombies, right?
Oh yeah, I think you're right.
Are you guys bummed that we haven't got our Cyborg movie?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that character showed so much promise, and no, I really, in the cartoon Teen Titans, he was an awesome character, and I loved him. So when
Yeah.
the Justice League when Joss Whedon's Justice League came out, there was nothing to the character. So what can you do with that? The DCEU, in saying that DCEU has shown that Aquaman, it can exist independently in of itself with a totally different mechanisms with the way even the world works. So, they can discard everything that's happening, have the same actors. So maybe Cyborg could have worked, but it's a dime a dozen in the DCEU.
I think it was initially rumored to be a Cyborg and Flash team-up movie. That Flash movie is still on the slate, but that's seeming less and less likely, especially given this
Did
week.
you see the stuff that came out?
The video of Ezra Miller, seemingly choking a woman and throwing her to the ground in a bar in Reykjavik. Very, very strange.
It's not a good
Ezra
look.
Miller kind of just oozes unlikability, doesn't he?
He was so perfect for
He
that.
really does, and he tries to high road people. Like, you kind of get that sense that he kind of thinks he's better than you type thing, and you're like, oh, this is not a good look on that.
I mean, he is definitely
It's
better than
unpleasant.
us, but still, that doesn't give him license to be like
Way better. He's way better than us, but still fuck him.
So another part of the industry is adapting to this current climate. South by Southwest, my personal favorite film festival in the world, is heading to Amazon Prime this month. So basically, all of the films that were programmed in for this festival that takes place in Austin, Texas, will now have the opportunity. The directors can opt in to show them on Amazon Prime for free. They will get a fee. They'll get a screening fee. And Amazon will have no rights over the film. They'll still be able to shop them out to distributors. So it's just a screening platform. You won't even need to be a Prime member. You can just have an Amazon account, a free Amazon account to watch these.
Wow.
So
really,
I think this is awesome. Like, regardless of everything going on in the world, this is so much better for me as a viewer to be able to watch these festival films in a way that's not so, well, in America, in one place. Because this festival, I read a lot of reporters and reviewers who go to these festivals, watch all these movies. It sounds so much fun, and a lot of my favorite movies kind of debut at this festival. So the fact that I'm actually going to be able to watch along this year is so exciting.
Yeah, this is the thing that I wanted to see with Black Widow, and it's so exciting to see this. If we're not going to get it with Disney, fair enough, but it's cool to see these companies teaming up to do something so creative, so different. I am incredibly excited. And as you said, Benny, South by Southwest is one of the big ones. So this is no small little underground crappy festival. This is where a lot of these A24 films are picked up, and interesting stuff.
I'm super curious as to how they're going to do this. From how long will they release the films for? Like, will it be available for a day? Will it be available for like a single screening, and then you just got to show up for that time? I'm fascinated to see how they're going to do this, because if you think about it, if they just make them available for like a week or two, that's essentially giving that film a wide release. And one of the things that you kind of want, like one of the, I guess, benefits of South by Southwest is that it is a very limited release that you can kind of build up this, word of mouth, and you can kind of build up this hype behind a film, and then you can distribute it, and you can kind of it's a platform for a lot of filmmakers to kind of give their film legs. And if you're doing, if you're doing that as like a wide release where everyone can watch it and can watch it easily, I wonder if that kind of devalues South by Southwest, if that kind of takes away its part of its purpose.
I mean, from my perspective, that's an interesting train of thought, and not something that I had thought about. But from my perspective, I'm thinking like, average Joe going to watch Black Widow, Mr. Normie, little Mr. Normie over there doing his thing with his belt and his pants and whatnot. You know, that guy, is he going to be interested in South by Southwest? You know, you got to be of a certain you know, higher intelligence and echelon. No, I'm kidding. But you know, you've got
Well,
to
I was about to say that guy's never heard of South by Southwest, but now you make me sound like an
you know, maybe some, you know, I think my mum, for example, might check a couple of these out, you know, whilst, you know, I think people who maybe have heard of South by Southwest, who are maybe into a little bit more artsy films or like to go see something a little bit more off the beaten track, who haven't had the opportunity, and especially in countries like Australia, you know, this really opens it up and makes it, well, what is this festival? You know, this is totally uncharted territory. So I understand, like, what is this festival? What does it become? But I think it's going to rope in a lot of those sort of exterior people who are maybe not necessarily die hard, you know, South by Southwest. They're going to be at Sydney Film Festival. It'll be that next outer ring of people that will also be able to check this out, which I think is just fantastic and really exciting.
Yeah, I think this will just turn all of those people like me who hear about the films at South by Southwest and are like, oh, I've heard about this one. I really want to see this. I want to bring people to go see this movie when I finally have the opportunity. Turn those people into the people who have seen it, like the reviewers being like, everyone has to see this movie. I want to watch this again. I want to tell everyone I know to go watch this as well. Because that's just generally how I'd react to these sort of things. So I'm keen.
I'm so keen. Cannot wait. Is that all the news? Oh, no.
In so much as that was news, yeah.
That's all we wanted to talk about, only the good stuff here. But as it is the outbreak of COVID-19, we thought we would go and give a few little favorites of zombie films, or maybe some new ones that we haven't ever seen before. So we're each going to go one by one, bring a zombie film to the table. We're going to give our top three here, or our three picks for this particular episode, and just talk about them. I mean, the really cool thing that I've seen sort of taken away from this, seeing these zombie movies, is just how much fun it is to play with the genre. You know, what type of zombies are they? How are the mechanisms work? How does the outbreak happen? And the different framing and types of narratives and genres you can frame around the zombie archetype. You know, it's so cool. And there's a lot of rubbish in there with zombie films, you know, let's be honest, but there's some really fantastic ones, and I had a great time, and I'm really excited to bring my picks forward. So I don't know who wants to go first. Benny, you know, we're normally in our seats, you know, we normally go. Oh no, Connor, you want to go first?
Yeah, because I think this will work well, because there's an obvious follow-up for you.
Okay, perfect.
So my first off the list, which is probably one of, if not my absolute favorite zombie film, is somewhat unsurprisingly 28 Days Later. It's I remember that being a film that I watched and was kind of, remember that first indication of like liking the fact that this was not a movie about a zombie outbreak. It was about, you know, a situation that had already developed. So it wasn't about that kind of like first infection and you know, how that spread or something like that. You came into the story having had people, you know, adjusted, so to speak, into the new norm. And I really liked that concept. From an execution point of view, I really love this film as well. I always bugger up his name. It's Cillian Murphy, right? Or not Cillian Murphy? Which one is it? Cillian. All right. I was watching a interview that he did, and he was talking about this, like those opening shots, about how they got that, and they had set up like cheap, you know, cheap recorders. And, you know, they would shut off like, you know, big sections of London, and then he would walk through, and they kind of just hoped that they got the footage. And it seemed to have worked out great. And I was like, fuck, man, I just love that little timbit. And it's obviously it's turned into such an iconic sequence. of him waking up and exploring this abandoned London. And so I just that for me is a really iconic kind of classic zombie film.
Connor, can you just turn off your camera, man? Because I think your bandwidth's getting messed up, and you're just skipping a little bit every now and then.
Yep.
But yeah, I watched this week.
Bye.
28 days later. I'm sorry. Now you can get naked. Yeah, I watched this week, and what a fascinating
Already halfway
watch,
there.
man. Woohoo! You know what? You know what's so amazing about this film is the fact that it's all shot on Handycam, so it's got a really grainy look. But Danny Boyle manages to keep the cinematography interesting. He shoots through a lot of windows. He shoots through a lot of different glass and reflections, and it has the most visceral shaky cam style, and the editing and everything. It's so well put together. It's really masterful film. Terribly creepy. That opening scene, Connor, that you were mentioning before, where he's walking through London, and that song, that instrumental rock song, just gradually building up in this frantic way as this guy is starting to unravel. Like, I am starting to figure out what the fuck's going on. Amazing stuff. And then some of the George A. Romero themes at the end, we're not the zombie's not really the bad guy. It's the human beings that are the true evil in these films, and we get that theme come through. And then what I loved about this film was the last scenes, and it was all shot on 35mm for the last few shots. Spoilers to those who. Sorry if you haven't seen this, it's not really a big spoiler, but it goes from this really grainy Handycam style to this 35mm beautiful, crisp, and it's just such a well thought out film, and shows you how fantastic of a film director or a visionary Danny Boyle is, and bringing some totally new flavors to the zombie genre.
You mentioned that amazing score by John Murphy as well, Georgie, which is one that I listen to all the time. I love his stuff in that. And this movie's a really cool mix of like a classic zombie movie, while at the same time being an absolute kind of groundbreaking game changer for zombie movies, because this is really the one that introduced the fast zombie. The infected, the runners, the ones who aren't just rigor mortis who want to bite you. And that has kind of changed all zombie shit forever from there.
Truly terrifying.
There's now a kind of trope in zombie films where it's like, is it the fast or slow type of zombie? And it kind of feels like it feels weird to think of a time that wasn't the case, like where you didn't have that option.
Yeah, but this is I was so impressed with watching this film, and I know, Connor, you mentioned that it's the film is sort of about the outbreak that's already happened, but you get the first scene with the sort of vegan animal activists letting these monkeys out, and they've got the rage virus, and it's so gruesome and bloody, and it's like, wow, you get a sense of what is to come. And I remember seeing this film when I was a kid, I think 15 years old, and it freaked me the fuck out in the cinema. And I still got freaked out in this. It's so great. As a horror film, as a zombie film. 28 Days Later, incredible stuff.
Do you guys have any thoughts on 28 Weeks Later?
Well, that's probably a good point for me to bring in my first
Funny you should mention that, Ben.
Because I watched 28 Weeks Later this week, and
Perfect.
So this is a massive drop, but still has some really interesting stuff in here. There's so much in 28 Days Later. There's some really, really iconic stuff in here. You've got in 28 Days Later, you've got the scene with Cillian Murphy walking through London. You've got the eye drop scene with Brendan Gleeson. You've got there's just some really iconic scenes and moments in that. And 28 Weeks Later, whilst it expands and the world building is really, really cool, the idea that there's this secondary sort of isolated world that's formed, and everything's kind of reshaping up nicely, and then an outbreak to occur in that. There was some interesting stuff in there, and some interesting stuff with the law, with the heterochromia, the different colored eyes, but ultimately the characters, it truly shows you how just the character work done in 28 days later is so far superior, and you don't really care about these characters at the end. It's still got some great scenes like the helicopter shaving off all the zombies in the field and decapitating them. That's really fun, but ultimately it's just not. It really does pale in comparison to the original.
Yeah, I mean, you do talk about iconic scenes though, and that scene of the Dawn or whatever his name is. I was just trying to look up the names of him running away from his family. I think that
oh yeah
is one of those scenes that has stuck with me, and it doesn't even feel like it belongs in that film because that singular scene is so fucking good, and it conveys such a kind of intensity that I give that movie a pass grade on that scene alone.
It's funny. I remember so little of that sequel film, but there is one part of that stands in my mind more than probably anything else in either film, which is just when they're all in the shelter and someone gets infected somehow. I don't quite remember, but it just turns this locked in shelter into an absolute meat grinder of people tearing each other apart.
It's the horrific.
Dad. It really spooked me. Yeah,
the dad because
is that when he goes and doesn't he kiss his wife or something?
Yes, and
it's horrible. Yeah.
Yeah, she's got the heterochromia, and she's got the virus, like a suppressed version of the virus, and then he starts going mental. And him as the bad guy, as a human being, as well as a zombie. Yeah, he's an awesome character, and there's no doubt. I can't remember that actor's name, but he was a very famous English actor. And
I was trying to find his
right.
name. Yeah.
You're 100% right, Connor. That opening scene is just gut-wrenching, and it's really well put together. But I don't think it really gets much better than that, to be perfectly frank.
No, I mean, that is definitely the highlight of that film. And everything post that is, when I did watch it, I remember it being good, but there's no touching 28 days, right? Like it hasn't cemented itself as that kind of that level of awesome, I suppose.
Worth mentioning that Jeremy Renner is one of the leads, which is a weird fact about that movie.
He's just snipering people the whole time. And literally half of the movie, he's looking down a sniper barrel. And also, fun fact, Idris Elba's in this with a fucking sexy mo. And Rose Byrne's in this as well. So
nice.
It's got a lot of talent to come through. This was 2007, so very, very interesting to sort of see those guys a couple years ago.
I'd be keen to see 28 years later one day. Hopefully,
let's bring it. Robert
Carlyle.
Trainspotting.
Scottish actor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Benny.
Yeah.
Let us know.
So I didn't really want to face the prospect of just watching zombie movies all week. So I was kind of focusing more on the zombie and just general outbreak stuff.
Cool.
A little bit of variety.
Fantastic.
But to segue directly into zombies, I watched a very recent movie that I consider kind of the archetypal zombie movie. It does everything every zombie movie's ever done, but I think it does it almost better than any of them, which is Train to Busan by Yeon Sang-ho, which is, I believe, on Netflix. Just a very simple premise that we've seen before on paper. A zombie outbreak begins in Korea, and we kind of view it through the small lens of it happening just on a train for most of the movie. People kind of moving through the carriages, kind of similar to Snowpiercer. And it really just boils down to everything you could ever want from a zombie movie and executes it perfectly in this one film. I think it's like the gold standard for zombie films.
Yeah, I still need to see this, man. Like, I was supposed to watch it this week, but that'll be. I'll definitely report in for next week because that is 100% on my list. I cannot wait to watch this. I was scanning all these lists this week to figure out what zombie films I was going to watch, and that was kept popping up again and again. I know it's so great. My wife was watching it 3 or 4 times and says, "Why haven't you watched it?" So, I have no excuse at this stage, and I've failed everyone. Is basically where.
Well, one of the great portrayals of zombies, they're like they really feel like undead, inhuman creatures, the way that they just throw themselves around like just demonic gymnasts. It's really something to see. And there is a prequel, Soul Station, which is animated, which I've heard is really cool. And there's a sequel on the way as well.
Yeah, big news about that.
Yeah, you haven't seen this, Connor?
No, I haven't. It's again, it shows up on all the lists of like top zombie films, and it's obviously something that's on my radar. I went for a bit of a different tact with the my other two films, but it is certainly on my list to see.
And the zombies, all the images I've seen
recommend.
of the zombies, they look absolutely terrifying. The makeup looks fantastic. I just can't wait to watch this.
Yeah, cool.
So I'll report in next week, folks.
Oh, it's back to me, isn't it?
Back to you. What's the second pick?
Right. So for my two remaining ones, I got sidetracked on this idea of doing like expanding the genre, and looked at comedy, zombie comedies, and there's quite a few to choose from. But there's one that had caught my eye a while back, and I was interested to see if it was any good, and that's Cooties, which is the Elijah Wood zombie film that is about teachers that get caught in a zombie outbreak in a school, that the zombie virus only affects the kids. And I thought that on a concept level, there was a lot that they could do with that. I thought that there was going to be some really fun stuff associated with that. In reality, it was pretty bad. And I think that it kind of fell victim to that idea of movies kind of running with a premise and then not really caring about everything else, right? Like everything, the kind of the character development felt very, very iffy. The plot felt very iffy. The, even some of the acting was pretty average. And the acting and the writing, really, which made me very surprised, because this is co-written by Lee Winnell, who we've all seen, kind of do some really good stuff lately, including Upgrade and The Invisible Man. So, I was quite shocked to see when I saw that. But yeah, for me, it was kind of this just little exploration into how a good concept, particularly with something like zombies, is not enough to carry a film, right? Like, all the really good zombie films that we will talk about have something else to them. Like, with the 28 Days Later, they're kind of exploring not just about how to get away from zombies, but it's, how do these kinds of situations bring out the worst in us and also the best in us? Even 28 Weeks Later, like it explores some interesting concepts, that it has some very, in terms of the visuals and the actual execution of a zombie film, it's a very good, like you're talking, Ben, about the meat grinder, that kind of scene can stick with you. And this movie just didn't have any of that, right? Like it didn't really execute on any of the potentials.
Yeah, if I could just tuck in quickly another one that I watched, that it wasn't really great enough to kind of mention, but was interesting, and definitely did that thing where it had an interesting concept that they could explore a lot out of. I watched that Ellen Page film, The Cured, about a post-zombie outbreak world in which they actually found a cure for it and managed to cure, I think, 75% of the infected, but those people could remember everything they'd done.
Oh, cool.
And it's set in Ireland, and it's just this really interesting divided world where, you have the people who lived through a zombie outbreak and just do not trust these people who were infected, who have this little mark in their eye that kind of distinguishes them from other people.
That
and
really cool.
It had some really interesting stuff in it. A very
It's an awesome
very
concept.
Metaphorical, yeah. And it was pretty good. It was pretty good, but not a knockout.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, that sounds fascinating. And in this one, Connor, that you brought to the table, yeah, I've just had a look at it, and 49 on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm not going to say Rotten Tomatoes is the be all end all, but the metrics are there for you.
Yeah, I think I figured that it had a solid enough concept, and
Group
with
of talent.
you can definitely imagine how that film could be really good.
Yeah, 100%.
Written by Lee Winnell, produced by Elijah Wood, had a lot of other like actors that were really good, and like the acting talent in it is decent, right? So, yeah, it just didn't come together.
So my second pick is Peter Jackson's third feature, Brain Dead, which is just a fantastic film from the early 90s. I really do love going back to watch directors' first films, and I have not done that with Peter Jackson, and to see him at work here is fantastic. I mean, a lot of the same people that still work with him today, Fran Walsh, his wife, all the the technical team, the special effects. I'm sure it's the same bunch of people. So, it's the basic story behind this film is this guy, his mother is very oppressive of him. He's an only child, and his mother becomes gets infected and becomes a zombie, and it's this unfolding of this situation. And it reminded me a lot of Reanimator. It sort of seems like very sort of like closed down situation, only a couple sets in there. But it really is just so well put together. The characters are that fantastic. And I turned to my wife, we're about 25 minutes into the piece, and I was like, I get this character so much more than all these other people in 28 Weeks Later, because we watched those sort of back to back. I was like, I get this character. I know what he's about. I understand him back to back, and that's really just great writing and storytelling. So schlocky effects, like the final scenes, if you haven't seen this before, the final scenes with the lawnmower, oh my goodness, amazing stuff. Super gory, super out there, a fun time if you're into practical effects and schlocky schlocky stuff with great stories and a great script.
His stuff before Lord of the Rings, before he kind of blew up, was all of that style of like just incredibly schlocky, really out there, which I kind of love, man.
Oh, it's so great.
Have you seen Bad Taste, Georgie?
I have to see that.
Yeah, I've only seen bits and pieces of his early movies, but they are fucking off the wall.
It's so much fun. And, like the amount of work involved, like the shot list is insane. He really gets so much in this film. It's fantastic to see, and you can see a lot of the Peter Jackson fingerprint that he has in Lord of the Rings in here as well. So I love seeing that kind of stuff. And this film, for those who don't know, this film was released as Dead Alive in North America. So maybe yeah. So that's another little thing. So that's my second pick. Benny, what's your second pick?
So one I sat down to watch this week that I don't even know why I actually put it on is The Bay, directed by Barry Levinson, who directed Rain Man, funnily enough. So this is like a 2011 movie. I only knew it as being like kind of a shitty found footage film when that was really, really picking up steam after Paranormal Activity came out. And I was really surprised to find that that's not what it actually is. It's a mockumentary film about a viral or fungal or some kind of outbreak in a small seaside town in America. And I eventually, when the credits rolled, saw that it was actually produced by Oren Peli, the director of Paranormal Activity, and Jason Blum, which is cool.
Oh, wow.
And that was an indication of why it was a much better movie than I was expecting. Now, this is no masterpiece by any means, but it is so committed to being a convincingly made documentary. Like the entire film is shot through so many different kinds of footage, so many different like qualities of footage, like different kinds of film and like streaming quality and interviews and security footage, different aspect ratios. If it weren't so extremely outlandish, unbelievably violent and insensitive, I guess, to all of the people who die in it, you could believe it was an actual documentary about an outbreak. It's, like I said, this is not an amazing film, but it really did take some interesting turns that I wasn't expecting. And it's very clearly based quite firmly in science and reality, taken to a very fantastical level. But everything that happens in it is just like this weird coalescence of all these different kind of man-made issues that turn into a really quite horrific series of events on this little town. It was pretty fun, I got to say.
This does sound fun.
Yeah,
I'm actually quite happy to hear that.
I think,
There
you go.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
Okay, I think it's really interesting watching movies that, kind of, given our current situation, focus on the human response to this sort of stuff, and kind of really put forward quite accurately, it seems, just how unprepared the world is to accept that something really bad is happening, and we need to kind of tackle it very head on. And that's completely understandable. That's from a personal single person level to like a governmental level. Like that makes complete sense. Like, you know, bystander syndrome and just all these half measures. But yeah, seeing that kind of on this, in this kind of microcosm of this film, it was quite apt.
I'm really, really keen to check this out, man.
I'm very interested now.
Yeah, adjust your expectations, but it's not bad.
Even just on just a presentation or a concept level, you know, I'd love to just check this out. Good pick. I've never heard of that film, and I did.
I reckon you'd probably recognize it if you saw like the poster or something, right?
Well, I'm looking at it now, and I don't recognize it. The skull.
No, yeah,
sort of
it's
thing.
very like I should just leave this and not watch it. Like it seems like that.
Yeah, it looks
Yeah.
like that from the poster.
Yeah.
Connor, what's your third pick, dude?
So I kind of alluded to this when I said that I checked out whatever it's called, Cooties. But there was a more recent one that had a very similar concept in the vein of zombie comedy that, you know, involved kids and all that, and that was Little Monsters, which is the Lupita Nyong'o and Josh Gad film, Australian film, and that kind of on a concept level seemed very similar, but on an execution level seemed far better. And upon watching it, it was, you know, million times better. This is actually this is kind of, I think, one of the cool things about the zombie genre is that it does have an enormous amount of diversity, and you have room for this kind of, I guess, you know, film that has, it's almost a musical, if I'm to be honest, right? Like, you know, a lot of it is Nyong'o's character singing to her class on her ukulele, and kind of towards the end, kind of it struck me about how much of this film was musical, and I thought that's kind of fantastic that they were able to incorporate that into this genre. You know, I think that, you know, once you get past the 20-minute mark on this film, you know, it ramps up real quick, and I just, I really enjoyed this film, and Josh Gad was fantastic in it as well. He plays such a dislikable character. Yeah,
I thought the trailers for this one looked fun. One thing that stood out to me is it looked like it really wasn't, despite being full of children, pulling any punches at being like an actual proper zombie film. Did it deliver on that front?
Oh yeah, blood and guts, and I thought that the execution on the actual zombies was surprisingly good, right? Like it, the makeup on him looked really solid. So yeah, it checks all the boxes as a zombie film, and that's what I really loved, right? Like they didn't sacrifice any of the, I guess, the genre in order to make something that was funny, or that dealt with, like school children.
Sorry to do it to you again, George. We'll get right back to you. But Connor, you've thrown me another segue that I can't ignore. You mentioned that this movie is almost a musical. One I watched earlier in the year was an actual zombie musical. I don't know if you guys remember watching the trailer for this, Anna and the Apocalypse.
Did you watch that?
Yeah. I thought it looked really fun. And sure enough, it was not amazing. I ended up quite loving the musical aspects of it. I thought the soundtrack was fantastic. And just like Little Monsters, evidently, it really did not hold back at all in terms of being a full-on zombie movie. So I really appreciated the fact that they were aiming for such a small audience, people who love musicals and people who love hardcore zombie movies, and just really committed to it. It was definitely fun and worth a watch, if only for the novelty. And like I said, I really enjoyed the soundtrack. But yeah, that was a really interesting one too.
I'm so sorry, I just yawned then. Connor, would you recommend that one that you watched to me?
Constantly. Little Monsters.
Yeah, well, I enjoyed that
yeah,
one.
look,
I think that's not really up my alley because musicals,
Well, you hated the trailers.
It's not
George.
A musical.
I did. I did hate the trailers.
It is not a musical, but there was more music aspect to it than I thought.
Anticipated,
look,
yeah.
It's really difficult to recommend this. It's because it's not, you're not going to get the kind of character development that you get in 28 Days Later, right? Like it's not that kind of gritty, you don't go into it for that kind of level, right? But in terms of having a fun time, I think this is easily a watch and a recommend.
Nice one. My third pick this week was one of my absolute favorite films and something that I just love putting on. I watched it on Blu-ray. I cracked out the old Blu-ray, Paranorman, Leica's Paranorman, which is, honestly, this is the shit, man. Like, this film is of another class. Leica's production of another class. This film is so timeless in its look. I couldn't believe this came out in 2012. It doesn't look a day old. The production techniques in this, it's actually a really scary film. My wife, Ash and I, we were saying, if I was 8 years old, this would be freaky as fuck. There's some actual horror elements to this. It is like, I said, this is so uncommercial. Leica, there's no attempt to make money with these films. This is pure art. And I am just in awe of this film. I think it could be it's up there with Kubo as my two favorites for Leica Productions. It is outstanding stuff.
Yeah, easily my favorite Leica film. I find generally with Leica there is something holding me back from most of their films from like absolutely head over heels loving them. I generally more respect them than love them, but Paranorman I find I was actually just so impressed with on every level. Gorgeous film, really touching, really surprising, really dark. I really hope everyone's kind of done their due diligence and sought this film out.
It's just incredible. I love the little reference as well to Halloween with the ringtone, and there's a little Easter egg looking out the window with the Jason Voorhees mask. That was really fun in there, and just the folklore, the density in this film. It's actually really, really outstanding stuff on every aspect of this film. I cannot fault it. I think what was something I wanted to bring up about something I wanted to bring up specifically about this. I can't remember. But Connor, have you seen Paranorman?
Yep. I was shocked by that film. Like that film was so much like not that I thought that it was going to be bad, but I really enjoyed that film.
Yeah, it's just incredible stuff. I think well, I remember the point. I think this is quite a progressive film, and it brings a lot of interesting things to the table. And there's one character, he's gay, and there's just some really interesting stuff in here. And I respect this film on so many levels. I love that the one character is in a stop motion. There's a guy with the ear gauges, and he's kind of like a punk metal kid. I think like there's so much fun stuff in here. I know that sounds really a silly little detail to pick up on, but I got a kick out of that. So yeah, Paranorman in terms of zombie is just one of the best, and if not one of the best, probably the best, one of the best stop motion animation features to ever be put together. Benny, number 3.
I can't help myself. Just a little side one. I'm only one episode in, but a TV series from almost a decade ago, I think, created by Charlie Brooker, who made Black Mirror. He made a series called Dead Set, which is literally just about a bunch of people in the Big Brother house during a zombie outbreak. So they're trapped. Everyone remembers Big Brother. They're trapped in the Big Brother house. They don't realize what is happening in the outside world, and it's just a really fun little look at kind of what gets ignored in a lot of zombie fiction, which is all of the really specific areas where people's experience of a zombie outbreak would be really different to the mainstream kind of general how it unfolds, because it kind of happens in a similar way in most of these movies. 28 Days Later is a great example of like a really different take on that. And this, I'm very intrigued so far. I'm keen to see where it goes.
Speaking of series that I want to check out, I know we'll get through it eventually, was Kingdom. I'm very interested to see that.
I was going to mention that, yeah.
Hailed as a, yeah.
Yeah, 16th century Korea, epic zombie fantasy. I'm probably going to start watching that this week. I'm very interested.
Good things.
And so for my third pick here, another not really a zombie movie, It Comes at Night, directed by Trey Edward Schultz. Now this is your kind of post-apocalyptic after the outbreak world. We're basically just watching this one kind of group of people in the woods in this decimated world where, as a viewer, you don't really know what has happened to these people. All you know is that they are so afraid, so paranoid, and so precautious. And I don't want to really reveal anything about this movie. I would say do not watch the trailer because it alludes to certain things that is not the direction the film goes. A lot of people were unhappy with this movie when they finally saw it because it is not necessarily what you're expecting. I'm the kind of viewer where I froth that shit. I like, give me movies that surprise me all day long. And I remember when I first watched this movie, just seeing it unfold and realizing what it was actually about, and getting to the end and just sitting in the theater for like 10 minutes being like, holy fuck, I'm kind of blown away by that. So yeah, this is not great for a podcast necessarily. This is more just one I'm saying go and see for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, this is outstanding stuff. You recommended this to me. I remember watching this in Scotland on my honeymoon.
Nice.
It is just one of those films that I had an incredible experience with. I can't even imagine what it was like seeing it in the cinema. But conceptually and also in terms of the dynamics between the characters, that's what this film is all about. And it is tense. Joel Edgerton gives a performance of a lifetime. It's my favorite thing that he's in. And man, this works on so many levels. I wanted to put it on this week. And I need to give it a rewatch 100%.
Funny that you mentioned watching it in the cinema and what that must be like, because that actually really added something very specific to this movie that I'll never forget. Was I was so blown away by the movie. I sat all the way to the end of the credits and just sat there for a little while in the cinema reading about it, because it's, one of those ones that just gets in your brain.
Yeah.
And it was the last session. It was like a 9:30 p.m. session. I had been alone in the cinema, and I sat there long enough that the cinema shut down and all the lights went down in the giant auditorium I was in. And I have never bolted so fast out of a cinema in my life, because like
my
as soon
God.
as that darkness was like slipping its fingers over me, I'm like, I am out of here. I think I shivered out of the cinema more
Oh
than
my
ran.
goodness. That's so scary, man. That's like my worst nightmare. God, when we had to check the cinema at nighttime on the close shift, that used to scare the shit out of me, man. No good. No good for the soul. Well, that was heaps of fun. Great, awesome recommends there. Sorry, have we just mitigated completely talking about it? It Comes at Night, or was there anything else to discuss there?
No, that was it. The less you know, the better.
You don't want to talk too much about it. Yeah.
Agreed. Well, that was a ton of fun. There are a couple more recommends there to check out, and I just had so much fun this week. We're going to do this again next week. Does anyone want to bring any ideas to the table for next week?
Ooh.
Nope.
I had one.
No, I'll have to think about it. All right, yeah, let's hear it.
90s sci-fi. The Abyss.
So just our regular viewing.
Just our regular shit. 90s sci-fi, anything let's do it. So we're going to do a similar thing next week, guys. There's going to be no more news, so, and I'm not doing much at nighttime, so I'm really enjoying watching all these films. Hit us up with any zombie recommends that you guys have at home. Always looking for some off the beaten track stuff, so let us know if there's any gems out there that we maybe don't know about. And we'll be back next week. Thanks to everyone for our patience last week with us missing. Thank you for everyone who's listening in. Hope you're all well at home. If there's any type of content you want to hear from us, we're all ears, because we're trying to figure this whole thing out. So if there's
any type of content,
you want to set up a Podcast Strikes Back OnlyFans account, if there's demand, I need a bit of extra cash on the side, so let's diversify the portfolio, diversify the risk, they say. Anyway, this has been fun. Good to catch up. See you next week, Connor and Benny.
Catch you guys.
Bye.
Bye.